life. The traditional family customs and rituals of Korea. This is the village of Onhae in North Gyeongsang province of Korea, the birthplace of better known by his pen name, Turge. It is inhabited by his descendants who have inherited his philosophy, which venerates morality and values justice. Let us observe Korea's unique traditional family rules and rituals as practiced by Mr. Chin Sung-lee and his family, the head family of the Chin clan. Korea's ancient family rituals begin even before the child is born. This ceremony prays for the coming of a son. In olden times, the Korean people believed that they could guarantee the birth of a son by offering a prayer. Prayer was either a tree, a village well, a piece of rock, or a carved stone image. But in any case, its shape must be phallic, or it should suggest a sexual act. In the old days, sorcery prompted the people to remove the nose of a stone Buddha standing in the field, as the nose was thought to symbolize the male organ. Now, when a woman becomes pregnant following such practices, she must faithfully observe various taboos for the sake of the treasured baby. Her secret prayer for a son continues by keeping or carrying symbols of masculinity. She places an axe or a long feather of a cock under her mattress, or winds a bowstring around her waist. She prays to the three gods day and night to have a son. In this way, her value to the family is enhanced, and possible grounds for later divorce avoided. A son was referred to as red pepper, and a daughter as barley. When the voice exclaiming red pepper was heard from the delivery room, the husband's mother prepared a food table in front of the room and bowed to the three gods 7 times. A piece of straw rope was hung at the gate to announce the arrival of a baby. The straw was festooned with red peppers and charcoal for a son, and charcoal and pine branches for a daughter. The straw rope, a no admission signal to outsiders, stayed there 3 weeks for a boy and 1 week for a girl. The son's name, the time and date of his birth, and other data were written down in the family genealogy book. A son who would become responsible for the family's well-being and the sacrificial rites dedicated to its ancestors was an important person in Korean society. Taboos intended for the baby's baby's safety decrease gradually as time passes, and on the 100th day after birth, 100 white rice cakes, symbolizing prayers for longevity of the child, are given away to passers-by. People believed that when they gave away food to others or did good deeds, good fortune would follow. The first bamboo joint of life is formed on the first birthday. This calls for a big celebration. All kinds of food are prepared and placed on the table. In addition, thread, rice, money, a brush, a bow, and other symbolic objects are there for the baby to grab. His future is predicted by the object he picks up first. On the 8th day of April, by the lunar calendar, which is Buddha's birthday, in the year following the child's birth, a hair-cutting ceremony is observed, presided over by the oldest grandmother in the village, who acts as barber. A Korean child grows via constant bodily contact with his mother. He is fed on his mother's milk until a younger brother or sister is born. While sleeping, the mother lets the baby lie down beside her, placing his head on her arm in lieu of a pillow, so that it is not parted from her body. Meanwhile, the number of his life's annual bamboo joints grows, and when it reaches 5, he is taught the 4 directions of east, west, south, and north, and the numbers from 1 to 100.
마루에 오를 때에는 반드시 근기침을 하느니라.
In the past, a boy began to study the elementary course of Confucianism and to practice good manners from the age of 7. When he reached 14, he studied the advanced course, which gave him insight into the principles of all creation and of life itself. A day was picked for the coming-of-age ceremony, when he became a young man. At this ceremony is a top knot, and he put on a hat and an inner cap for the first time. His father or brother, who must be of high moral repute, placed the cap on the young man's head. This process, however, merged into that of the wedding ceremony as time went by, and thus disappeared long ago. This is Ha-hae village in Andong, Korea, where the descendants of Yu Sung-yong live. He was Minister of State during the reign of King Sunjo of the Yi dynasty in the 16th century. Through a matchmaker, The women of the Yi family are to have an interview with a prospective bride from the Yu family. Even in an interview, it is customary for women not to look directly at the face of the groom-to-be. It is a mere formality to face each other after the elders of the two families make the decision. In the distant past, parents of both sides often picked a groom not mature enough for matrimony and a bride 7 or 8 years older. The couple had no choice in the matter. After the interview, the groom's family sends to the bride data, including dates and times of birth. The paper is folded in 5 and put into an envelope. On the envelope are written Chinese characters, meaning 4 stars. The envelope is wrapped neatly in red cloth. By checking the dates and times of birth against the 5 elements of Chinese cosmogony, namely metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, the bride's family makes an assessment of whether the couple would have a happy home. Then the family decides on the wedding day and informs the groom's family in writing. The red and blue cloth containing the message is the sign of marriage approval. On the eve of the wedding day, the groom's family sends a lacquer chest to the bride's family as a gift. Manservants of the groom's family, but today it is carried by the groom's friends, wearing old clothes and with their faces blackened in some cases. family must pay for the carrying expenses of the bride's gift. After wrangling over the charges, eventually the chest carriers relinquish it and then receive a reward. The contents of the gift box, material evidence of matrimony, differ according to the living standards of the groom's family. On the wedding day, the groom, wearing a Korean silk hat and traditional costume, proceeds to the bride's house on horseback. The bride's makeup is characterized by lipstick and rouge applied to her forehead. The groom appears first before the nuptial table. He then presents a wild goose made of wood to the bride's family. The wild goose is a symbol of everlasting love. After the groom bows twice facing north, the bride approaches. Placing the table in between, the groom faces east and the bride west. Each locality has its own rule for nuptial vows. Here the groom bows twice and the bride 4 times to each other. When a cup of Korean wine is shared, the couple is united. While the Western-style wedding uses a vow taken directly by the couple, the Korean vow is expressed indirectly through presentation of the wooden goose and sharing of the same wine cup. The night of the wedding is spent at the bride's house. The groom helps the bride to undress. If he doesn't do this, she must sit up and stay awake overnight, since she is assumed to be too shy to take the initiative. The young groom simply follows what he was told to do by the adults in the family. bride looks shy with her head lowered, she knows what is going on better than he does. As the evening stretches deep into the night, the women in the family make holes in the paper cupboard sliding door and watch what goes on inside. It is said this was intended to drive out the evils which haunt the sites of happy occasions. Only the groom upside down, binding his feet to the crossbeam, hitting the soles of his feet and asking him what went on the previous night. It's all in good fun and friendship, and so the bride's family offer them a treat. The procession is composed of the groom on horseback, followed by the bride's flower palanquin, guarded by 4 lantern bearers. Arriving at the village, the procession stops by any house with a straw rope for a sun hung in front. They take a red pepper from it and suspend it in front of the palanquin, wishing for the bride to give birth to a son. But a parting from her family for the bride, since in the old days, some strict fathers never allowed their married daughter to return to the family, even for a brief visit. In the meantime, man and woman form each bamboo joint of the human life cycle in the constant flow of time. Sweet honeymoon days in the beginning and both the merry and bitter days that follow. In the past, if a man lived beyond 60 in Korea, it was something close to a miracle. Everyone in the family gathered to celebrate his 60th birthday, which was a rare occasion of longevity. In the house of mourning, the women gather to sew the shroud for the deceased and funeral garments for the mourners in the family. The family prepares a small altar. deceased leaves the world amidst the wailing of the mourners. The mortal body will wither away, but the uncorruptible soul will live forever. After the ceremony of farewell, the deceased is placed upon a bier, and the preparation for departure proceeds. After it is lowered into the grave, and the first shovel of earth is thrown over it by the chief mourner, the coffin is buried. The pallbearers tamp down the grave, singing the earth-pounding song in a prayer for the repose of the departed soul. However, the soul of the deceased remains in the altar at the house or in the village shrine and continues to live with the family. The family observes memorial services 3 days after and again 100 days after burial, just as 3 days and 100 days after birth was celebrated. The family continues observing sacrificial rites for 3 years after death, on festive days as well as on the anniversary of death. Even after death, the soul of a Korean thus lives on with his descendants forever. Man's life is similar to the growing bamboo. Although Korea's traditional family customs and rituals are fading away before the surge of modernization, the bamboo joints of life are inherited faithfully in the stream of consciousness of the Korean people, transcending time and space.